10 years in prison. That's how long a judge sentenced Marc Wilson.
That is the maximum sentence allowed after a Statesboro jury convicted Wilson last month of involuntary manslaughter in the shooting of Haley Hutchinson. We turn now to our Nakia Carrera. She's live outside the courthouse. Nakia, you have covered this trial from the beginning.
That's right, Greg. I've been here since jury selection to the guilty verdict and now sentencing. Judge Ronald Thompson sentenced Marc Wilson right before 5 o'clock to the maximum of 10 years. Wilson was found guilty back on August 31st of involuntary manslaughter for the of 17-year-old Haley Hutchinson. Wilson was out on bond during the trial until he was found guilty. The defense team spoke to us about the conviction.
Our task was very clear, and that was to stop illegal lynching. This DA, like many runaway DAs across the state, Daphne Totten is no different from a Jackie Johnson, wanted Marc Wilson's life. And despite the verdict today, despite the sentence today, she will not have it. Marc Wilson will have a life, and I'm grateful for that.
And to see him get 10 years, I think, well, you know, this young man, he's never been in trouble.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, I think y'all did a records check, correct?
Yes, sir.
There was nothing found on this young man. This is a young man who, again, look at his family. Look at his family from Charleston, South Carolina, all over. Right. We're very thankful. We thank this team and know that we will continue to fight.
Nakia, what about his time served?
Greg, he has already served 682 days in jail for this case. So that time served will be put towards his 10-year sentence. Greg?
Nakia Carrera reporting live. Thanks so very much.
All right. Peace and blessings, ladies and gentlemen. Peace and blessings. All praises to the Most High. The news clip that you heard or saw was that concerning Marc Wilson, who is now 25 years old. And as you hear, he is currently serving a 10-year sentence for the charge of involuntary manslaughter. Now, this incident happened on June the 14th, 2020. Only about 6 or 7 or 8 days or thereof after the George Floyd incident. Now, how does that relate to this? Because it was on June the 14th where Marc Wilson, who was then at the time 21, was riding down a country road in Statesboro, Georgia, with his then girlfriend, Emma Rigdon. Now, as you saw Marc's parents in the video, Marc's father is Black and his mother is white. So some people would consider him biracial, but as you can see, the law considers him Black. But on this night, the two were riding and they were approached by a truck full of white males. That is the only thing that Marc Wilson could see. And it was at this point that these white males started harassing them, yelling racial slurs, and trying to run Marc and his girlfriend off the road. Now, according to the trial and testimony of the girlfriend, she said they were saying things like the N-word and also saying that your lives don't matter and calling Wilson's girlfriend a N-word lover. All the while trying to run them off of the road. Now, keep in mind, it's during the time of the George Floyd protest. That's why you hear them saying your lives don't matter. So fearing for his life, and again, standing his ground, Marc took out his legal firearm and fired at the truck, defending him and his girlfriend, fearing for their life. Now, mind you, this is on a country road at 1 in the morning. Now, the bullets that he fired evidently hit 17-year-old white girl, Haley Hutchinson. She was riding with the group of unruly individuals. Unfortunately, Haley Hutchinson lost her life due to the shooting. And as we've seen with the Maurice Byrd case and the Sipho Bennett case, they have exercised their right to stand their ground against the attack. Now, Georgia is also one of the states. And if I didn't mention it happened in Statesboro, Georgia, Georgia is also one of the states who have implemented the Stand Your Ground law, where if you feel that your life is in danger against imminent threat, then you have the right to use deadly force to protect yourself. Regardless of this fact, Marc Wilson was charged with felony M-word, amongst a lot of other charges. He was jailed and spent 2 years in jail before making bond and going to trial. However, in September the 20th, 2022, as you see from the news clip, he was convicted and sentenced to the maximum of 10 years in prison for basically standing his ground. Now, as you heard the father say, he had never been in trouble before. He was a legal registered owner of a firearm, and him and his girlfriend was just out trying to have a night of fun when being approached by these obvious thugs. Now, there were several things in the trial that were, some would see as bias or demonstrating the double standard between blacks using the Stand Your Ground law and whites using the Stand Your Ground law. Now, as I mentioned before in the Maurice Byrd case, 33% of white cases who use Stand Your Ground law are justified, as opposed to only 3% of black people who claim self-defense as a right to stand their ground are justified. Now, they really wanted to give him the rest of his life in prison for the felony M-word charge. But a lot of things happened during the trial. One judge had to recuse himself. And if you don't know what that means he had to get off the case because he had met with prosecutors to review some emails that the defendant, Marc Wilson, had sent to his family. So that was a breach of protocol. And even then, some of the teenagers in the car were charged with obstruction of justice and hiding evidence. Now, of course, the white teens or young adults were saying, no, we didn't do this or we didn't do that. You know, we wasn't messing with them. But one of the teens, one of the men have been charged with obstructing evidence as it relates to the case, basically lying. You know, a lot during the trial. All of the instigators, I would say, had different stories. Now, they did to admit to being intoxicated and drinking, right? But they don't admit to calling those names. Now, if you're intoxicated and you're drinking, you're out like that, I can pretty much believe my brother Marc Wilson and his claims that he feared for his life and these people were trying to run him off the road. And once again, this happened in 2022. And one of Marcus's cousins, who was white, a relative of his white mother, had this to say: if you put me in Marc's shoes, there is no way that I would have been prosecuted, Wilson's cousin Chance said. odds are I would have been given a medal. Probably gotten a parade in my name. It's unreal how he was treated just because he's a little bit more tan than I am. Now, that is from the mouth of his white cousin, highlighting the disparities of the situations like this. Now, the judge, they dropped the felony M-word charge and all the other charges, and they presented the charge of involuntary manslaughter, which carries once again the maximum of 10 years. However, the judge did not inform the jurors that there were two types of manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. There was felony involuntary manslaughter, and there was misdemeanor involuntary manslaughter. So the judge did not tell the jury that they had that option to either choose between one or the other. Now, that in itself is a miscarriage of justice. However, as the lawyer was saying, we were hoping that he would get leniency. Nevertheless, this judge, Ronnie Thompson, sentenced him to the maximum on September the 20th. As a further slap in the face of justice, this man is going to say this is a colorblind decision. He said, well, the court is very mindful of what was going on when this happened, everything that was going on in the country, referring to the George Floyd situation. And, you know, I think somebody made a statement about Marcus Wilson being capable of unaliving someone. Well, one thing that the court has thought about is maybe all of us in a certain situation are capable of unaliving someone depending on the circumstances. The question in a society where we value law and order is whether or not it's justified. And that is the question. He said everyone is capable of doing what Marcus did under the circumstances, but it's only justified when the victim is black and the shooter is white. And then he's going to talk about law and order. And as we've seen, there are two separate forms of law and order in this country. One for whites and one for blacks. Now, of course, they highlight again the George Zimmerman case where he was allowed to stand his ground against 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Now, I have no doubt that the fact that the victim was a young, lily white, all-American white girl. Let's be honest. But the fact that she was in a truck with a bunch of rowdy, drunk, young adults, maybe even teenagers, should be taken into consideration. As Mark Wilson's girlfriend put it, if he would not have done, now this is a white girl speaking as well, if he would not have done what he did that night, we probably wouldn't be here. We probably wouldn't be here. And she added on, she said, Mark Wilson, which is her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, is not the reason that Haley is not here with us today. Whose fault is it? It's the guys in the truck that were trying to run this young couple off the road. But regardless of all of those facts and the circumstances, the judge chose to impose the maximum penalty. And once again, this was 2 years ago when he was sentenced. So now he's probably 25 years old, about 4 or 5 years into a sentence. So this young man had his whole life altered. Now, mind you, they wanted to give him life for the felony M-word conviction. So there is a little semblance of justice there, but true and complete justice, as we've seen throughout other circumstances, would have been Marcus Wilson going home to his family, who traveled all over from the United States to see him, going home to his family and continuing his life without being ran off the road by a group of rowdy, drunken, racist white young adults or teenagers. And actually, looking at this article, the two white men in the truck, the driver was Mason Glisson and the passenger Ashton Deloach, acknowledged that they had been drinking and they were underage. They said that the attorney states that these two white men mistook Wilson and his girlfriend Riggin as another interracial couple. And another man, and that's the man that I was talking about earlier, Luke Conley, they charged him with misdemeanor obstruction early in investigation for alleged inconsistencies in his story, meaning he was lying, basically. And then to further add insult to injury, meaning he probably couldn't keep his lie straight, he took the Fifth Amendment at the trial. And the girlfriend, Emma Rigdon, also testified at the trial, saying that she was afraid, the truck had swerved, and the young man had been hanging out of the windows. And, that's when Wilson acted. She also testified, she said, I fully believe Marc saved my life that night. I wholly believe if Marc was not there that night and wouldn't have done what he did, we would have been unalive. And then again, as I told you earlier, she said, Marc is not the reason Haley is not here. And looking at this article, I must correct, the charges were not dismissed. A jury trial acquitted him of everything, including the felony M-word, and also second-degree M-word and voluntary manslaughter. So they gave him the smallest charge of involuntary manslaughter, and then the judge gave him the stiffest penalty. And so no one can tell me that this judge, Ronnie Thompson, was not acting in racial bias. And so as the defense attorney said in the news clip, our job was to prevent a legal lynching in which a man was over-sentenced for a crime that he probably shouldn't have been charged with to begin with. If Marc Wilson was Caucasian or a little less tan, as his cousin put it, he wouldn't be in court anyway. This is just, once again, another example of the double standard and the racial bias when it comes to the legal system. Here we have a black man and his girlfriend riding down the street, minding their business, and then they are attacked, basically, by white teenagers, drunken white teenagers, lying white teenagers, trying to run them off the road. And he exercises his legal right, pulls out his legal firearm, and exercises the legal stance of standing his ground, yet and still he has to spend 10 years in prison. His life is forever altered because of the actions of these people. So hopefully this young man will be able to survive his prison sentence and come out without much trauma. If you've ever been in prison, there's definitely trauma associated with that. But once again, I just had to highlight this instance of another case of black men standing their ground and not being able to use that legal defense. As you heard the case of Maurice Byrd, who was attacked by a white man who he had a long-standing conflict with. He called the police, he defended himself, and yet he is sitting in jail right now in a Pennsylvania jail fighting for his life. As well, you know, the case of Sippo Bennett. If you haven't, that's in Dufresne Springs, Florida, where he also was targeted by a truck full of drunken young white males, in which, once again, he feared for his life and he stood his ground. Yet and still, he is also sitting in a jail cell fighting for his life. So tell me, what's the difference? Y'all tell me in the comments, what's the difference? Why is it that black people are not allowed to stand their ground as much as white people? Is it because our life have been devalued so much in this country? Are we not citizens of America? Or is the Dred Scott decision still in full effect? That a black man has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Is that still true? Evidently, it is still true in the courts of America. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. 919-587-7782. Peace and blessings.
From local stories to Wayne County news, get ready to dive into everything happening in North Carolina with Taylor House Publishing. Got a story to share? Shoot us an email at taylorpublishinghouse@gmail.com. If you're looking to publish your book or need some top-notch mentorship, we've got your back. Join the excitement with the one and only Richard Taylor, right here at Taylor House Publishing. Speak with Richard directly at 919-587-7782. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and invite your family and friends to watch.
From Wayne County to the Carolina coast, Taylor House brings the news you love most. Tune in on YouTube, don't miss a beat. Local stories that keep you in your feet.
Taylor House, we got the scoop. Taylor House Publishing.